welcome to another conversation video. This is Lily, and she is one of, she's a no small creator, and she's got a super fascinating life, and I'm really excited to share this conversation with everyone. Thank you for being here, Lily.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on your conversations. I've been watching a few of them, and I enjoyed them a lot.
Cool. Yeah, you're a robotics major or doctor, or what are your things in life?
Well, I have an MSc in evolutionary and adaptive systems, which is sort of a robotics thing. It's mobile robotics, and that's what I did before I became a photographer. So a bit of a
That's so cool.
strange trajectory.
It's not like trajectories in life have to make sense.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I think they tend to be a lot more interesting when they don't make sense. And then at some point,
Yeah.
everything comes together and you go, oh, right, that's why.
It's kind of like saying that you have to have a niche for your entire life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm always amazed when people tell me they've been doing this one thing for the last 40 years, and I'm like, how? How can you stay so focused on one thing? I'm not like that at all. I have many different interests.
So when we talked earlier, the thing that like I was like, okay, I want to jump into that. That is like, was your story about you were kicked out of a class or out of a whole school?
It was a class. It was my
It was a class.
it was my informatics class in high school. I think it was year 12 or something like that. My dad taught me to code. Uh, he's the reason why I got the robotics degree in the end. He taught me to code when I was in year 8 or year 7 or something like that. And I grew up in East Germany, where it's completely normal for women to be good at maths, and no one questions that. And uh, also technology, you don't question that either, whether women can handle technology. My grandma was an engineer, actually, so it's a lot more common there to be like into tech as a woman or to be really good at maths. And my dad taught me to code, so I never experienced any sort of sexism in that regard until I moved to West Germany. And there at that school, the informatics teacher threw me out of informatics class because he assumed that I had copied in an assignment. It was something to do with pointers, and they can be very confusing. If you don't know anything about programming, never mind. It's just very confusing, those types of things. And he just assumed that I, as a girl, can't code, and so I must have copied from the boy, when in reality this guy had copied from me. So yeah. And I tried to go to the counselor for like the year, like a head coordinator or something like that, and tried to say, oh, I want to be in that class. Why did he throw me out? And he said like, yeah, better don't object. You're only gonna get a bad grade in the end. So I couldn't really do anything about that.
Come on.
Yeah, yeah. And then after I finished school, I actually did an apprenticeship in IT. And this guy who had thrown me out of class also gave me a really bad grade. So I was applying for informatics jobs with a really bad grade, and I had been thrown out of informatics class. And yeah, it was really difficult.
It was a circle there, a complete circle of being excluded.
Yeah, totally.
And then how did you stick it to him?
Well, in the end, I I had a whole lot of job interviews and all that, and I had the first one was another one of those examples. I came to that job interview, and this HR guy who was interviewing me, he started telling me about the tasks I would have to do in that job, and he started off with, yeah, you'd have to make coffee and say hello to visitors, and I'm like, what is going on? So I say, but you're aware that I applied for a coding job, right? And his face goes like, and then he was like overcompensating. I'm so sorry. I completely mixed it up. I thought you were applying for like a, what was it, receptionist job. Just automatically assuming, okay, if a girl comes in there, she must be applying for a receptionist job. And yeah. And yeah, it was just one of those things.
Like we're like the same age basically. So this would have been early-ish 2000s.
Like 2000, 2004, 2005 or something.
This is not 1950. Come on.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And then he, in the end, he introduced me to these coders who would have been on the same team, and they had the same facial expression. Like why does he introduce us to receptionists now? And then he said, so she would be joining your coding team, like with this emphasis. And their facial expression changed from what the fuck to dear God, no. So it got only worse. And yeah, I decided that, nah, that job, not for me. And this guy was really, really bad at reading the room in that in that moment. He actually offered me the job, and then I had to like say, yeah, I'll think about it.
Don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah.
When did you get a job where people actually like respected you for your skills?
So I actually got it. In the end, I took a job where the boss was a woman. So that was girl power. And yeah, the job really wasn't for me though, because it wasn't a coding job. It was system integration. So it was a lot of phone support and repairing computers and all of that. I mean, I'm okay at that, but I don't think I quite excel at explaining people how to use a computer, especially things like really simple things. I get very frustrated. Like at some point, there was a confusion with one of the people working there who thought that when I said go up with the mouse, that she was supposed to lift the mouse, and yeah, that was kind of the level of IT knowledge in that space. And this was like a finance company or something like that. So they weren't hiring for their computer skills, and it kind of was very obvious that they weren't. And I was so frustrated by that job. Like it was one of those jobs where you just dread getting out of bed in the morning, and you just don't want to continue doing that. And the thought of doing that for the rest of my life was like, no way, I will not survive.
How long did you have to do that?
I did that for about a year, a bit longer. I was actually doing this because I didn't get into the study program that I wanted to get into. I wanted to get into a course called Media and Cultural Studies. And since I wasn't really that into high school, I was mainly, going to parties and to gigs, and I had a mohawk, and yeah, I was not really conforming too well at that time. Yeah, high school was really not, I didn't have that great marks, like average, I would say. But that degree program was like one of those where you have to have like an average of A minus, that sort of thing. And I didn't have the grades. at all. So they told me, I got a letter from them saying that I would have to wait 6 years. That's how long it would have taken. And then after a year, they had this big computer failure at the university. And that computer failure is all connected to computers. It's funny. That computer failure caused them to send out the acceptance letters way too late, like 2 months late, and then everyone already had gone somewhere else. So they filled up the course with people who were on the waiting list, and I was one of them. And I got into that course like 3 months too late and in late clearing, and it was huge luck that I got in there. It was great. And I could quit my IT support job, the one that I hated. So I was so happy when that happened.
Oh man.
And I quit my job the next day, the very next day.
Wow. So that's just so interesting that you grew up in East Germany and there women were allowed to have brains. Like,
Yeah.
did that like also, how do I phrase this, extend to performing femininity? Were women expected to wear dresses and heels and makeup and things?
Oh, well, it really depends because my mom is Russian, and in Russia or in like the Russian speaking countries, or at that point where she was from the Ukraine. It was also Russian speaking at the time. Now it's not. And in all of those countries, women are super feminine. Always high heels, lots of makeup, and it's just one of those things. They're just so trimmed on being as feminine as possible. Whereas in East Germany, not so much. I mean, sure, women also dress up, but not to such an extent. Also, not to an extent like, I don't know, in Britain or something like that. In Britain, you always see girls with, really short skirts and skimpy tops and all that. That's not so common in East Germany.
That's so interesting. How did did your mom being Russian put pressure on you to be extra feminine?
No, not at all. Not at all. She just accepted me for who I was really. And when I was a kid, I had like short hair most of the time because my hair was very thin, and my mom thought if she cut it short, then it would grow back thicker. And she was actually right about that. Like now it's pretty thick. So, thanks, mom. uh, but yeah, I for a long time until I was like, I don't know, 16 or something. I always had short hair, or like at most that length. And then I had a mohawk, which is even shorter. But yeah, I can send you a picture. You can edit that in.
Yes, please. That's so cool. Oh my goodness. I never ever did anything crazy with my hair. The only thing I ever did was get thick blonde chunks in 2004.
Oh yeah.
That was
Time.
like the thing. And then my dad said I'd looked like a skunk in Cruella de Vil, and I was like, thanks, Dad. It's like in some cultures, it's so lucky for women who are grown up in a culture that they can just enjoy the subjects that they enjoy. And it's like
Yeah.
in some cultures, you're only allowed to enjoy presenting as beautiful. Like beauty is the goal. And that's just something I've never understood ever.
Yeah, for me it was the same. I always found that super shallow, and I mean, I went to a high school that was geared towards higher education, so there wasn't really anything like what you get what you get maybe in other high schools which don't lead towards going to uni. You would get like, oh, if you're very good at a subject, and people would bully you for being, the brainiac or whatever, and that would never happen in the high school where I went to. It just was geared towards academic achievement anyway, so there was never a problem. Whereas in my primary school, I was bullied a lot for being smart, and I was also like in a working class neighborhood, like socialist concrete blocks everywhere, and yeah, there it was a big problem being more intelligent than the rest, definitely. And from that school, I think in total, in my class, only 3 went to a high school that went on to uni. The rest just went to middle school that was geared towards getting a job afterwards. So there was a lot of bullying when you were a bit smarter.
My husband went into a school that focalized, that's not a word, specialized in math and music, or science and music, one of those two. He's studying right now to be a math and science teacher to grades like 6 to 8.
That's interesting. That's a strange combination, maths and music.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obvious connections, but that's the first I've heard that. Normally, you have those, and there's also an arts profile. You can like the painting and music and that sort of thing. There was also a high school like that, and I briefly considered going there. When I left to go to West Germany, the other option was to go to that school, but that would have meant to stay in my hometown, and I really didn't want to do that. Like I was just done with it, and I left when I was 17, so I decided that going to a school that wasn't really the right profile and something just at the other end of the country was better than staying in my hometown.
And I'm very boring. I graduated high school and I took a year off of things, and I had a job for less than a year working at a daycare, and then I joined Covenant Players and traveled around 3 continents and 26 countries for 12 years. And then I settled down in Sweden.
Very boring.
Very boring. No, I meant
very boring.
I used the wrong word there. I meant more like, for people who have had higher education, it's hard for them to comprehend me. Like, only high school?
No, I don't really think in that way, because I've met many people who didn't go to uni, who were, they just had a different focus in life, and it's not that they didn't read any books, or they just didn't want to go to uni. Like my brother also didn't go to uni in the end. I think he would have enjoyed it, but in the end, he didn't finish his A-levels. And in Germany, I mean, I call it A-levels, but in Germany it's called Abitur. And if you don't have Abitur...
I'm familiar with Abitur.
Yeah, and if you don't have that, you can't go to uni. And you always, in Germany, you always have to pass maths, and my brother's not really good at maths. He's super intelligent, but maths he can't, and so he couldn't go to uni.
If I had to have passed, had, if that been a requirement for me, I would not have finished high school.
Yeah.
I have distinct memories of being like, I got a D, I passed. And Mom and Dad, I'm so proud of you. But in Germany, it's like 1 to 5, right? Like 1 is the best and 5 is the worst, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 6 actually now.
Oh, 6.
It used to be a 1 to 5, and 1 is the best, and 6 is the worst, and a 5 is already a fail. Like if you get a 6, you gotta have really messed it up. Yeah. I don't think I've ever gotten a 5 I've gotten 5s in classes, especially when I refused to do the homework or things like that, or something was too silly for me and I didn't do it. There were a lot of instances of that. I had a mohawk, so I wasn't really complying all that much. But never at the end of a class, never at the end of a year. Like I never failed a course.
Mm-hmm. And so I would just give special attention to the silly assignments and then get completely overwhelmed by the super hard ones and just try to pretend they didn't exist. So that
Oh yeah.
at the end of the year, the teacher would be like, Katie's got to do all of these to pass. And I'd have to do like
Oh
everything.
no.
And I'd have to
Oh,
be like chained, not literally chained, but figuratively chained to the table to have to finish enough stuff to pass.
Oh dear.
yeah, no.
Well, for me, it was kind of attendance was like that. Like I would always get into trouble with too many days missing because I was just showing up at school. Not really my thing. Never been. Even now, I don't like being at a certain place at a certain time. It's just I don't work that way.
So when did you lose the mohawk?
I lost the mohawk. Well, I got rid of it when I was looking for a job in the first place. And then it made a comeback after my trial period was over. Not sure my employer was that impressed by it. But that's just how it goes. These apprenticeships, they can't really fire you because there are a lot of protections for the apprentices. So it's really hard to get someone thrown out for an apprenticeship because it's mostly people who are not of age yet, like 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and that means you can basically do whatever you want in the end. After you pass your trial period of 3 months, you can do whatever. And then the mohawk got also turned into something else. I didn't have it at the back. I only had it up here, and the sides were all shaven that I had for a long time. And then I let it grow out when I was in the UK because cutting my own mohawk in a shared accommodation was really difficult. Generally, living in shared accommodation is very difficult.
So I'm curious, what was your motivation to start a YouTube channel?
Oh, I was actually watching a lot of YouTube at the time, trying to learn to draw and paint. And the videos that I watched were mostly drawing time lapses and sketchbook tours and stuff like that. And I thought, well, these kinds of videos aren't hard to make, and I like the way I draw, so I could make videos like that. And it's actually super easy, so I made some videos like that and started off watching videos about how to grow a YouTube channel. Random. Even though I at that point didn't really have a proper plan for it or anything. I was just thinking, yeah, I want to make drawing videos because I'm drawing anyway, and yeah. And then that wasn't really going anywhere because that art YouTube is way oversaturated. Like there are so many great artists out there, and these videos are so easy to make so that everyone makes them. So it's impossible to get views for that kind of thing. Like sketchbook tours work, but a sketchbook, it takes me like a year to finish a sketchbook, and spending a year on one video is not really sustainable. That's not how you grow a channel. Doesn't work that way. So when that really wasn't going anywhere, I then decided, oh, I could do studio vlogs because those are also quite popular in the art niche. And then I'm actually a photographer, so if I'm gonna show what I do in the studio, most of it is gonna be photography actually. So in the end, I got way more views from that because I already had an audience for my photography from a blog that I started like 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. And so I already had an audience there, and then they enjoyed my studio vlogs, not the drawing bits, but maybe also those, but not primarily. And then I started making more the photography videos because people wanted more of that. And in the end, that's what I do most of the time anyway.
Wow. So you've been writing in a blog consistently for 10 years.
Yeah, no, not. I wrote consistently for about 5 years of those. Like pretty much at the beginning every day. And then, yeah, I think until 2014 or something, I was pretty much every day. Then I started shooting film, and film takes a while to develop, so I didn't really have pictures every day anymore. So I started making it more like every month, and then collect all the good pictures from that month in one big long post. I've been making those for a long time too.
I watched one of your videos that I was just so cool. It was so interesting, was the protest photography.
Oh yeah, I remember your comments on that.
Yeah. Can you share a bit about that experience?
Well, I'm primarily documentary photographer, so many of my projects are more static than that. Like I made a project about my hometown, which is mostly urban landscapes, but many of the pictures that I take otherwise are street photographs, like just candid situations out on the street, whatever I find there. And I always enjoy photographing protests because they tend to be quite interesting and very challenging to photograph because it's a crowd, so it always looks very similar. But you can find super interesting situations in crowds like that. And the protest, this particular protest was about the pension system here, which is, it doesn't pay people a lot of money. Like old people here tend to have very low pensions. And that's a big problem because the living costs around here are super high because of tourism. And people were basically protesting for dignified living conditions, effectively. Because, I mean, even if you work in this town, in San Sebastian, you can't really afford to live here because the pay for most people is relatively low, like maybe €1,000, relatively normal and considered like a decent salary. But rent tends to be about €1,000 for a place like ours, for example, like not super big, like 70 square or something like that. And you already pay 1,000 because this is tourist central and all the tourists come here, and then it just goes up. And so most people who work in this town actually live in one of the next villages outside, and it's super expensive. Even the villages are super expensive. And then imagine not even dignified pensions. Like they were asking for pensions that was 1,070 or something as a pension, when rent is already 1,000. How is that even doable? I have no idea. So often I have no idea how people even live here. And the answer is that most of them must be rich, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to afford it here. So, and they were protesting against that. They were protesting against all the cuts to the healthcare system that happened before. The financial crisis hit Spain pretty hard because it's mostly tourism and the what's it called, housing and these sorts of things that they have here. And after the financial crisis, they started having all these cuts imposed on them by the EU because of the rescue funds. And they were all linked to certain conditions that they had to meet. And one of them was that the healthcare system needs to be more sustainable, meaning sustainable meaning we just get rid of it, basically. It was cut down a lot. And then the pandemic hit. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the Spanish numbers looked really, really, really very bad in comparison to everywhere else. Also because it was hit as one of the first countries, as a tourist country. Funny, no one makes a connection somehow, but tourism is one of the big drivers of the pandemic in the first place. And people pretend as if that isn't the case. And oh yeah, we had to have a summer of tourism anyway, even though we are in the middle of a global pandemic. Great idea. So that frustrated me a lot. So yeah, the numbers were that bad in Spain, not only because it hit us here first, it was this bad because the EU had forced the country to cut down on healthcare like crazy, and they just didn't have any resources. It just had to turn into a disaster. Then lots of old people died in the pandemic. There's a rating for the sustainability of the pension system, and this rating has gone up. It's now better in Spain than it used to be, but that's because so many people died.
So the resources have less people that they can go to, basically.
And then something that a lot of people are not aware of, because it's not being talked about in the press, except in countries where this is the case, where this is a problem. The EU Corona Rescue Fund is actually tied to certain things too, and one of them is the sustainability of the pension system. So there's now an incentive for them to have as many old people die as possible, because that will improve the rating of the sustainability of the pension system. And most people for example, in Germany, where they wanted these rules, are not aware of this, because this was never discussed in their media. I was watching the newspapers, I was reading the newspapers in Germany. They were talking about all sorts of other stuff, like green energy and digitalization and all that stuff. But in Spain, what went through the press was sustainability of the pension system.
I think it's so moving to see people fighting for what they believe in, what they know is right. And I remember somebody in the comments was like, "Oh, you should leave politics out of your channel." But it's like, it's not politics, it's humanity, it's people.
Exactly. Yes.
I couldn't possibly leave it out. I mean, I'm very vocal about my opinions anyway. I'm like I'm saying this right now about the pandemic. I know a lot of people don't even believe that it exists, because they have been so believing certain kinds of people, and I'm not afraid of saying this out loud. This exists and it kills a lot of people, and that's it. I just have to say it out loud, because what's the alternative? Not fighting for what I believe in? Just accepting that people expect, people like me, I'm risk group, so they just expect me to put up with all of it and accept that they want to sacrifice me for, I don't know, haircuts and going to the pub. And I just can't shut up about that. Just have to say something, or else I feel like now I'm just lying down while they have me die. I don't know.
It's like you can't separate art from things that you care about.
Exactly.
And that's something that I've been struggling so much with. I've had so many conversations already, and I have so many more I need to edit and that are lined up that are really about challenging the lies that I've been taught. The lies that I've taught about how America is the greatest country, and what's right and wrong, and who are the heroes and who are the bad guys, and racism and whitewashed history. And it's like, you just can't separate it and you can't be quiet about it, no matter if people are going to be offended, because if people are offended about the truth, like the truth of what Black people are still going through,
Yes. Yes.
why
So
should
much.
I give a care about whether someone's offended about what's true? Like, it's their reality.
Yeah, I agree so much with that. There's this notion that if we want to, especially for women, we always are expected to be agreeable, to just say yes and not object to whatever everyone else expects of us. And goes with that starts with the family roles, that starts with what kind of jobs that you're supposed to do and what kind of jobs women are supposed to be good at or not good at. Like, I'm not supposed to be good at maths or computers or anything technological. I get men mansplaining my own camera to me on the street. As a photographer, that's just interesting experience. And we are supposed to, smile about it and be nice about it and just say, yes, I'm sure you know it better than I do. It's just expected of women. And I just can't. It's just impossible for me.
It's not our job to make men feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Whoever said that was a woman's job?
A lot of people say that. Like, have you ever been called bossy? I've been called bossy. I've been called confrontational. I've been called confrontational a lot. Like, one day you're gonna have a lot of problems in your life because you're always so confrontational. Well, I hope so.
I actually was spared a lot of that rhetoric because the ministry that I joined in 2005, I was 19 years old. It was a very women empowering atmosphere. The international director's a woman, and there's lots of women leaders in general. And so there was never this, there was a lot of things, there was humans involved. So there was some things that were not great because, humans suck.
Yeah.
But the things that were really good about it was that women were equal and there wasn't as much ageism as you'd imagine.
Oh yeah.
Like, if I, the 23-year-old, knew something better than the 45-year-old and said, oh, hey, you need to do it like this, they would say, okay, thanks, and do it. Like,
yeah, that's great.
Whoever knew the job was responsible for the job could explain it and keep things going.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't see a lot of that in Sweden, but of course I don't see a lot of people, full stop. But
yeah.
Even before the pandemic, people just like go home, go to work, go home, like.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's kind of similar for me here in Spain too. I mean, I live in a Basque country. They don't really want to be part of Spain, but it's still technically the Spanish territory. But the people here are very, I don't know how to describe it, closed maybe. They're very much in their own communities already, like the friends that they had since school, and they stay in those communities. And if you come into that from outside, they don't really want you to be part of it. It's just they have their thing, and that's enough for them. And it's not that they're unfriendly or anything. It's not that they treat you badly or anything like that. Not me, as someone who's white and comes from the north of Europe. I don't get treated badly. My husband is from Argentina. He does get treated badly. But that's because a lot of the Latin Americans who live here usually do all the menial labor jobs, and the women are the nannies here and the people who take care of old people, and the men are builders and that sort of thing. So there's a sort of, when he experiences the people here, often he experiences it as racism.
And
Wow. Have you
I don't get that.
experienced racism as like, why are you married to him? Like stuff like
No,
stuff
no.
like that?
Nothing like that at all. Except, you know, the typical Argentinian Spanish rivalry thing. But that's like a cultural thing. They always think that the Argentinians get all the women. That's one of those cultural stereotypes.
The Latin lover stereotype.
Yeah, that's
that stereotype. But no, I haven't experienced it like that. And for me, the most I get is that people talk to me like I'm a bit dumb because my Spanish is not perfect. It's okay, and I can get my meaning across, but I do make mistakes sometimes, and sometimes I feel like they're talking to me like I'm a bit thick, you know? But then my husband says they talk to him the same way. I don't know. Maybe they talk to each other that way too. I don't know. He says that people here have a way of speaking that is just they repeat themselves a lot, and maybe it's cultural. I don't know. To me it comes across as if they think I'm a bit dumb, but it's probably not that.
It's so frustrating when you know you're smart, but you can't speak in a way that expresses how smart you are. Like I've experienced that so many years of my life. I've been in Europe for like 12 years. No, longer than. Dude, how long has it been? I came here on my 21st birthday. I've only been back for short trips since then. The longest chunk of time I've spent in America since then was like 6-ish months.
Oh, it's interesting. That's almost the same amount of time that I've spent abroad too, because I left Germany when I was like 22, I think. And I lived in Berlin in between, but Berlin is not really Germany. I didn't even speak much German while I was living there because most of my friends there weren't German. So that was also like living abroad.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get what you're saying with feeling that you're not really getting your meaning across.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun to talk.
Yeah. So the way that I end my videos is I say hugs.
Okay.
And then I also do nostrils of death, but I mean we can skip that part if you'd rather.
Better not the nostrils of death. Oh no.
We don't have to do it. We can skip that. Bye.
Bye.
I know so many stinking cool YouTubers out there. If you would like to see more amazing conversations with other creative people, check out this playlist on the left. If you'd like to get to know me a little bit better and step into my little world of my life in Sweden, you can check out this playlist on the right. Bye!